New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth. To live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge. On the growing edge.
And now, here's Allie.
Good morning and welcome to Growing Edge Live. I'm Allie Benjamin, and it is my great joy to be here today. We have conversations with soul-centered individuals that channel their time, their creativity, their love, their resources into doing good work in the world. And if you're here for the first time, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. You didn't find us by accident. I know that there was something that led you to this episode, this podcast. And if you're here because you enjoy every week these deep dive conversations, I'm so glad that you're part of this Growing Edge Live community. Today we have a good friend of mine, Bill Soroka. Bill is I've got to get the number because you keep writing new books. He is a 7-time best-selling author and the founder of Notary Coach. And we'll get into more of all of this. But Bill, welcome.
Thank you so much, Allie. It's such a pleasure to be back.
Yeah, it's really good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. And I know you've had a big move from a coast to the mountains. And so I'm looking forward to hearing about that. And as many of my viewers will know or see, your last name is the same as Diana's last name, my partner in authoring our book, Her Wings Appeared. And so we have a lot to discuss and dive into. But most importantly, your newest book, The Nectar List, is something that is so inspiring and so timely. The Nectar List is something that we are definitely going to focus on with this episode. So before we get going, would you tell us a little bit about you and how you got to be an author and a notary coach, and maybe a little bit about your move to the mountains?
Oh my gosh, that's a whole bunch. We're just going to spend all day here?
Yeah.
I'd love to. From a very young age, I had multiple interests. I always wanted to do different careers, different businesses. And I always was in love with the idea of being an entrepreneur. I wasn't fully familiar with the kind of work that goes in behind the scenes of an entrepreneur, though. So as I got older, I did start lots of businesses, and I failed at many of them. I had 26 business failures, I think, before I was even like 38 years old or something. So it was a lot. But then right when my world came tumbling down, like what I define as absolute rock bottom, where I wasn't sure I was actually going to make it out of that. I was barely clinging on to this hope and this dream of being an entrepreneur. And I was introduced to being a mobile notary and a loan signing agent for the mortgage industry. And when I started that business, of course, I drug all those bad habits with me from the 26 before it. So it was a struggle. It wasn't easy. It's not like I just woke up one day and suddenly I was a millionaire notary, right? It really was a rough road. But staying committed to it and going through personal development, learning a lot more about myself, how I show up to the world, what motivates me, that work with the Enneagram really helped me out with this. The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod really gave me some foundational tips and a ladder to pull myself out. I was able to create a framework that relied on habits and routines.
Mm.
That was new for me because as a Enneagram type 7, I resisted habits and routines my entire life. I thought those were for boring people. And so I was like, I'm going to be that one standout entrepreneur that doesn't have to do all those things and succeed. And of course it didn't work. So I finally relinquished and I embraced that habits and routine are everything. And I was able to build a very successful solo mobile notary business. And then I started leveraging that. I was like, this changed my life. I went from being impoverished, broke, destitute, even like on the verge of being kicked out of my living situation because I couldn't pay rent, to making multiple six figures every single year on repeat. And I built a framework around that and launched Notary Coach. And part of that journey, which I'm so grateful for, is using this platform to help me tap into the inner part of my soul that wanted to be an author.
Mm.
So my first 5 books are about the notary business. And if you thought you couldn't write 5 books about the notary business, I've probably got 5 more still in me
Oh my God.
that are on their way out. So it's been a wild journey.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And good for you. I know that that's been a journey that many of us have sort of watched from the sideline and really been impressed by your ability to sort of break some of those habits that keep you stuck in wherever and develop some new ones to really be able to give voice to your soul. Because being an author, it sounds like it was that constant soul purpose or inner desire that didn't really come through in the notary world as much as it has in the author, being an author. And so to develop those habits that supported you in growing your business to be so successful, I'm sure then helped you as you started writing the last couple of books that you've written. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So where are you living at the moment?
So I live in beautiful Montana, and that was a fairly recent move from I started my journey in Arizona, had a brief stint in Colorado, and then a few years ago moved to the gateway to the San Juan Islands, Anacortes, Washington. And it's absolutely spectacular and beautiful. And then just this last fall, I moved to Montana, which is beautiful, just different. And we just got through our first winter, and I'm very much looking forward to spring and summer.
Yeah, you didn't have as much snow as they usually have, did you?
No, they said this was a very mild winter, and it did feel pretty mild. And I'm in the high plains of Great Falls, so it's sunny all the time. Like I think it's sunnier than Arizona was, but a lot windier and a lot cooler in the winter. But yeah, we got away with a pretty light winter so far.
Mm. You talked about having a real low spell in your life, and the work that you've done has helped you to come out of that hole. And I know, many of us have had rough times over the last, throughout our lives, but, since COVID and the lockdown and, coming back into the world and, all of the dynamics of, inequality and the things that are going on around the world, it's been a rough decade or so. And so there's many people that I know have experienced this, and there's many people that might be watching today or this is a recording that have been on a path of self-discovery, have wanted to move into a more joyful or more creative space. So can you talk about how that journey was for you, as far as what helped? What you talked about, breaking some of the habits that kept you not as highly functioning and not having as much joy in your life. So what is it that truly helps one to move beyond their old habits and routines into a more sort of soul-centered or soul-directed experience in not only their vocation, but in their personal relationships and their life in general. What is it that's helped you?
Thank you for narrowing that down to what helped. That was going to be a big journey. You know, there were a couple of things throughout, and I feel called to just say curiosity was one of the first ones. Just be curious and reflective of why you either have the results you want or the results you don't want. And that really was a critical factor in me, because when I was down in it, I took the time to do like a results inventory. And I just looked at my life and I said, why don't I have the things that I say I want? And because I knew I was smart enough, I knew I had supportive people, you know, I had the social component down. I could talk about being an entrepreneur. I could talk about wanting to travel the world and write words that touch, move, and inspire people. But why wasn't I actually doing the work? And that's a painful journey of discovery. And I realize why people avoid it, because it's 100% responsibility on you. It is very rarely, and I keep trying to find the exception to the rule in my own life, but it just doesn't exist. There's not an external factor. It is everything that I have going inside my head or the story I've made up about something. So I get married to these stories. And if I don't slow down and reflect upon them and ask if they're real or not, and if they serve me or not, then they start ruling the show. So having those periodic pauses through life has been very helpful. And then on top of that is what you do with that information once you find it, right? Once you discover that, you know, I used to get down and do the whole shame game, right? I just shame myself and I just make it worse because I should know this stuff. You know, I go to all the seminars, I do all the workshops, I read all the personal development books. I should know this stuff. But I had to give myself space and grace to not know that stuff, because reading is different than doing. Mm-hmm. So I just give myself permission to start with the beginner's mind and figure it out without the judgment and shame, but also take massive action, move, do something different than what I was doing before to get the results that I wanted. Mm-hmm. And I think that boils it down, and that keeps showing up. And I wish I could tell your listeners that it never happens again. Like you just figure life out and suddenly it's all easy, but it just doesn't seem to happen that way. It's just this constant peak and valley. There's just always something new to learn about yourself and about how we show up in this universe and how the universe works, what's meant for you and what's not meant for you, how other people show up to this, to your life. It's just a constant, I don't like to use the cliche, but it's a roller coaster of emotions all the time. So I'm constantly learning, and embracing that has really helped too. And that was easy for me. Again, leading with the type 7, I like variety and change, and boy, do I have it now.
Yeah. So that curiosity that you're talking about and this self-reflection, it sounds like that's combined for you in a lot of adventure, a lot of escapades, a lot of you going places and finding inspiration from your lifestyle, being curious in that way, not just focused in on, you know, creating a new business or all work. There seems to be a good measure of play. And that's just from someone that's, you know, knows you and what follows you on social. I can see that it's not all happening in your hometown. You do have that sense of adventure that's probably woven into your work.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the great perks of the kind of work I do. You know, as a practitioner, I was on the road every day. So it was just adventure after adventure, different parts of town or whatever. And I always blended adventure. And now I can do that even on a grander scale. But also I think there's this, and even on the entrepreneur side, you know, I love starting businesses. You know, I've started even more after I've failed at those 26. It's the creativity part. It's starting something, expressing something that's inside. And I choose, my business happens to be my masterpiece. So it allows me to express creatively every day. And I'll tell you, one of the great lessons I've learned is my best-selling books are my business books, right? Yeah, I have a very niche audience. It serves a very clear purpose. But the ones that I love to write the most are these personal essay books and these memoirs and the Nectar List and Dandelions. But they're the ones that don't sell as much. And I got caught in my head logically with this, right? I was like, well, what's the point of writing a book that doesn't sell? So I had to talk myself out of productivity with the Nectar List in particular, because it was the second of the essay books, to just create. And there's a great quote from Srinivas Rao that has motivated me in so many ways, not only for that book, but every day. And it is to have the courage to create what you want to exist in the world, regardless of how the world responds to it. And that just put everything in a different category for me, because I am highly driven. I'm a high producer. Everything is usually tied to productivity. But these books are different. I want them to exist because of who I become when I write them, and how I hope they might impact other people's lives when they read them.
That's really powerful, a powerful realization to come to. And I can relate to that with my paintings. Artists, painter artists, people don't buy art like they used to. People, if you go into galleries or if you talk to a gallery owner, you might realize that, there's a small percentage of society that's actually going to invest in art. And so painting can be, I think, for an artist, whether you're a writer artist or a floral artist or, whatever kind of creativity, whatever form it takes, I think there's this desire to express yourself, to be in that energy of authenticity with your creativity that transcends the, is this going to be a bestseller, or am I going to make a lot of money, or it somehow that you transcend that mindset because it feels so good to be in that creative space, doing whatever that might be. Cooking, for example, or, eating fine foods, all of that can be an art too. And so, unfortunately, in our society, in America in particularly, we are so driven to work and produce that, and many of us have to, because life is expensive. Not many people even give themselves the chance to follow their passions as far as creative expression go. And so I think you're speaking to something important here, because you're really showing the both and, the highly productive, highly driven, highly motivated businessman, but then also finding that time to dive into your curiosity and to contemplate what's most important to you in your soul as far as expressing yourself. And so just us having this conversation is sparking, activating something in the listener that might give them that invitation, or give them the motivation to accept that soul's invitation to dive into creativity.
I certainly hope so, because I think that's exactly it. I think it's even permission. I think people are waiting for permission for that, because whether it's an internal critic or an external critic, something has squelched that little voice inside that says, I want to try this. I want to tinker with this. I want to paint just to paint, or I want to write just to write. And we have been so ingrained to ignore that, that when you finally do listen to that voice inside, and that's exactly how I heard it. There was a voice inside of me who I tend to learn the lesson the hard way, right? So I don't listen to the whispers like Oprah tells you to do. It has to be this loud bang, like rude awakening. And literally the voice, I had declared I was going to be a writer like when I was 6 years old, right? But I didn't publish my first book until I was almost 40. So there was a huge gap there. But what drove that was this wake up call that says, hey, you're going to die with the story still inside you. Nobody is going to know anything about you, your journey, and you're not going to keep the promise that you told yourself when you were 6. And it was in such a loud, almost aggressive way that it shook me. And I was scared that I might die without doing some of the things that I had promised myself I would. And that was a wake up call for me that drove the desire to finally do this. And I thought I would be writing some bestseller, about the great American novel or something, but it was too big for me. I'm not a trained writer. I didn't go to school for this or anything like that. So I chose to use what I had at my disposal. What was I good at? And one of the best ways I had heard this described was, what could you stand up in front of a room and talk about for an hour without notes? I'm like, well, how to be a notary and a signing agent and how to make 6 figures. And I got so excited about it. And I was like, I got this clear framework. So that's how that emerged. And then once you get the first one out, there's no stopping you. Clearly. I'm at number 7 and I have number 8 coming out soon.
Wow. That's so wonderful. It's inspiring and energizing just to hear you talk about your own journey and your experience with that. So tell us a little bit about how you made that transition from writing the notary content to moving into the essay series of books. I know there's only 2, but I'm imagining there might be more.
Yeah, I think that's a safe assumption. During the pandemic, I started a little writing group with a friend of mine named Bobby, and she's 35 years older than me. Just a hoot, one of my best friends. And we started this little writing group that became a wine group. And we just had so much fun writing from prompts. So that ended up being our first book together called Dandelions. And when we published that book, Bobby was booking these readings in people's homes. And sometimes 20, 30 people are coming to a home after work to listen to us read our little essays, little glimpses into our lives. And it was one of the most beautiful experiences to see how people relate to it. People were laughing with us, crying with us. And I just realized that that's how I want to make people feel. And I remember the authors of my own life, David Sedaris, Anne Lamott, and I remember reading those books and laughing out loud and crying as I'm reading their little glimpse into their own lives. And I'm like, this is what I want to write. And so, of course, I wrangled Bobby up for the Nectar List. Now, the Nectar List itself was kind of born out of a crappy time in my business life, and I realized in retrospect that it was I was triggered by failure, right? So I've had 26 business failures. I was practically destitute. I finally built this business up, and then things got really shaky. And then I sparked this fear that I was going to lose everything that I had built. And so our mutual friend and my business coach, Linda, was like, whoa. Where's your Nectar List? I was like, I don't even know what a Nectar List is, Linda. Like, aren't you listening? My business is crumbling. It's falling apart. I was catastrophizing everything. And she introduced me to this concept of the Nectar List, which at its basic level is just a collection of your best memories, life's tender moments, things that make you laugh, sometimes even the ones that make you cry. Just the memories that remind you of the sweetness of life and the badassness of life, right? Like, you made big things happen. So she made me do this Nectar List. And as I started using it in my everyday life, just to remind myself and kind of pull myself out of that hole I was in, I was like, but a Nectar List is great, but there's a story behind every single one of these little memories. So I wrote Bobby in and I said, let's write about the story behind those little nectar moments. And that's how this was born. So this particular book was a calling from somewhere else. I just knew I had to write this book because I couldn't believe nobody I talked to had heard of a Nectar List. And I think it was such a helpful tool to me when we've got this dark and sinister feeling world sometimes, just to be able to pick something up and say, hey, it's not that bad. It'll get better. And even though I'm bombarded with these negative images all day, whether it's social media or on the news or in conversations or on headlines, I have another outlet, something else I can look at that reminds me of the sweetness and the tenderness of life. So that's how that came about, and that's what I want to write about.
So can you give us an example of, how an item or a memory on your Nectar List became an actual story? I'm imagining the process of, number one, taking Linda, your coach's advice in creating a Nectar List, but then to come to that realization that there's a story, there's a feeling, there's an energy, there's something behind each one of these memories that's going to be helpful when I bring it up and out. Do you have an example of one of those?
Oh yeah, I've got lots of these. Okay, so one example is, and this is recent, right? Like sometimes a Nectar List or nectar moments can come from back when you were a kid, some when you were in high school, maybe some in your 20s, but they exist now and they appear every day. And that's one lesson I've learned, is when I started writing them down, I started noticing them more. And when I start noticing them more, I actually need them less. So that was kind of a beautiful thing, right? When you start noticing these sweet, tender moments all around you, you can't help but stay a little elevated in your mindset, right? So I wasn't sinking as low as I had been before. So one of my favorite memories, it was just the cutest story. I had a favorite restaurant with an amazing view and a delicious martini in Anacortes. And I was sitting there at 2:00 in the afternoon, and this older couple, it turns out they were in their 90s, but they were dressed to the nines, him in a suit and her in a beautiful dress. And we were the only 3 people in the bar area. So they sat down, and it turns out they're celebrating their 75th anniversary. So it was just beautiful. So I wrote on my Nectar List, the couple celebrating their 75th anniversary at Anthony's. And how that turned into the story was the rest of it, right? Like, yes, that was beautiful in and of itself, but I sat there for an hour and a half, these 2 people who still loved each other after 75 years. They were friendly and polite and respectful to each other and truly celebrating their union, right? But they also were hard of hearing. So they weren't just talking, they were yelling at each other with love, just turning up the volume for each other because they couldn't hear. So he was asking her to pass the salt. She couldn't hear. It was just going back and forth through this whole beautiful experience. And when I think about that, even now, like, it brings a tear to my eye. It makes me smile. And I love that. So that's one of my favorite examples.
That's so beautiful. I want to get into some more examples of your Nectar List, but it's time that we take a short break. So we're going to pop off for a couple of minutes, and we will be back with Bill Soroka.
Please help us say thank you to all of our organizational sponsors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Center for Spiritual Living United Life, Sunshine Cathedral, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Universal Joy Center, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center Ottawa, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Satya Center, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and the Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. On behalf of New Thought Media Network, thank you, and please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, come be you.
And we're back with Bill and Allie. So this idea of a nectar list, I think I'd like to hear a couple more examples. Maybe you have one of Bobby's, and then I think I'd love to see or hear about how the nectar list has touched other people and what you've created, or maybe a better term would be what has formed in regards to a community around this idea of a nectar list.
Sure. Well, would it be helpful if I just maybe did a reading?
Yeah, that would be fabulous.
All right. Let me, I'll pull one up here. I've got a few, obviously, that I just love. This one, I just called Brenda and her mom, and I know exactly what it means. It was such a vibrant memory from an airplane ride. So Brenda, oops, that was close. Brenda, a hospice nurse sitting across the aisle of the aircraft. Her mom is sitting in the seat in front of me and pushing 80 years or older. She's fun. They both are. Brenda's mom offers me a junior mint from a freshly opened box. They make the cabin smell like a dental office, and I decline. Never been a fan. A few minutes later, she offered me a couple of Werther's original hard candies. Now we're talking. Another reason I get along with ladies of this generation. These are usually my favorite treats, but I'm not sure the exact depths of her purse, nor the decade from whence they came, but these were once hard candy were now chewy, but not like the chewy they would be if they were made that way. This was chewy like the innards of this once alive and joyful candy had been emulsified, barely held together by a crispy outer shell. It was a cadaver of a candy, and here it was in my mouth. I chewed quickly and efficiently in the tight quarters of the coach class cabin, and that's a story for another day, with Brenda staring at me, eager, pleased her mother could provide sustenance to a stranger, eliminating any possibility of the casual napkin spit. I had no choice but to swallow, and then promptly the second candy in the seat pocket in front of me, to be found again sometime in the future by another disappointed traveler.
Oh my God. What a little gem of a memory that, could have just gone by without any, notice. But to find the joy in that moment and the humor in that moment and the disgust in that moment. We've all had similar experiences, I'm sure, with, food that we don't know when it was produced, or what fingers have touched it. Yeah,
exactly.
That's hilarious.
I think we are surrounded by material. Like if you want to write, if you want to create, if you want whatever creative outlet, there is material around us every single day when you start paying attention. And paying attention, I think, it feels harder when you're not doing it, like I'll go through moments, right, where I forget. It's like, oh crap, I haven't been paying attention. I'm just head down. I'm trying to get through my day, whatever it might be. And you have to consciously slow yourself down and start to notice these things. But when you do, you start noticing these delightful moments surrounding you.
Yeah, I think that, as you said earlier, that inner voice, that inner negative voice that can take over, that inner critic, or the voice of shame, or how hard we are on ourselves, that can really take over if we're not careful. And this idea of being curious about the sweetness of life, and looking for those moments, I think can be the fuel if we can become, I don't like to use the word disciplined, but if we can become more accustomed to going down the path of curiosity, or seeking, my word for this year is beauty. I'm allowing beauty to be my energizing source. And so whether it's a sunset, or whether it's I'm in Lake Tahoe at the moment, and whether it's going for a walk with my sister's dog Lego, and we smell, the pine smell in the air, those nectar moments, those moments where you give yourself permission to not succumb to the voice in your head, or the to-do list, or the, all the other, pressures that we have, but to, I guess this is what mindfulness is, right? It's a dimension of mindfulness, really, to consider the joy in life, or the sweetness in life, or the to become more habituated, or more susceptible to focus on those things and allow those to be the energy or the energizing factors.
I think that's exactly what it comes down to. And I bet, I'm curious if you experienced this too, because this was a wake-up call for me over the course of my life. And again, always forgetting and coming back to it, but we find what we seek. So if we're looking for something to be beautiful, or if we're looking for something to be amazing, it comes out that way. If you're looking for it to be miserable, it just turns out that way. And I experience that a lot of times. I look at relationships, whether that's going to be a romantic one or a friendship. If I want to like someone, I am ignoring all the red flags, everything that could say, hey, maybe you should slow down and think about this, because I've decided that's what I want to see in this person. And it works in life that way too.
Yeah, the phrase comes up, when you change the way you look at things, the things that you look at change. And, that, I think for me, that's a good sort of touchstone when I can go into those more negative or critical mindsets about what's going on, or what, how I'm feeling about myself, or my own productivity, or my own creativity, to just stop and know that, like you said at the beginning, we're all 100% responsible. And so if we can soften that word responsible, and focus on looking at the things in our everyday life, and sort of spinning it a bit to be the more, I like to use this term, our most spiritually mature, self, when we, consider a relationship that isn't going so well, or a challenge that we might be having, and just kind of take a pause and a breather, and change our perspective on what's actually happening from that more mature, or that more awakened or elevated perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that's what this Nectar List book helps people to realize, that they are in the driver's seat. And I mean, maybe some people just read the book as a beautiful collection of wonderful snapshots or memories. But for those that maybe struggle with depression, or struggle with, being hard on themselves, might take this as an opportunity to reframe, or to see things differently. So how has you've done several readings, I would imagine. Can you tell us about, you mentioned Bobby and her wanting to gather people together, and how has that changed, not changed, how has that impacted you as you went through this book reading, gathering process with your first essay book, Dandelions, and now the Nectar List? I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, great question, because this was actually a big struggle for me too, and it really speaks to what you and I were discussing before we went live today. Is when you begin writing a book, you just automatically start becoming something else, someone else, as you're going through it. So you've got to be the writing part, the editing part, the formatting part, the publishing part, the selling your book part, all these different levels that you have to learn and overcome, and it triggers all these memories and challenges. And then there's the reading part. And for our first reading, I approached this like I approached networking meetings, which I despised, right? Like, it was my hardest lesson. I used to go out in the parking lot and throw up before a networking event. It was so uncomfortable for me. And I would be like, what? I felt like I had to pretend to be something at networking. That was before I was introduced to the concept of authentic networking, right? Like, you can show up and be you, and it's a lot easier than being somebody else. Well, I struggled with this idea of people coming to someone's house and just sitting around listening to two authors read their books to them. I was like, who does that? And they're all going to laugh at you. You know, I had all these things going through my head. And I worked myself into quite a frenzy, and I felt sick to my stomach, and I was thinking I was going to cancel and just stay in the bedroom the whole time. But I overcame it, and I overthought it like crazy, right? I had everything. I'm telling Bobby where she's going to sit. I'm like, okay, here's where you stand, ready. She's like, no, Bill, we're not doing that. You know, if you know Bobby, she's just super casual. So we ended up doing it, and it was such a beautiful experience. People really enjoyed and related to the stories. They shared some of theirs. It just went back and forth, and something in me changed from that first one, and then I couldn't get enough, right? We did several for Dandelions, and then for Nectar List, it was even, I think, a little more emotional. I never saw so many people cry in public, right? When we're speaking, like, clearly they're relating to the story. It's triggering memories of their own childhood or their own relationships or whatever it might be. So again, you because of the vulnerability of the stories, and I think that's a key element to a good story, people got to know us on a deeper level, and we got to know them on a deeper level through these intimate nectar readings, we call them. So it's been a really beautiful experience. I love doing them. I can't wait for the next round.
That's so interesting that you were so apprehensive to do them and had a lot of nerves in even thinking about that. What was that? Was it your fear of vulnerability, or just not knowing how you or others might respond to, sharing those intimate moments? And they're not all intimate, I know, but so what was it that you were fearful of going into that?
Good question. I have a feeling it's, first, a lot of people that know me now where I am, I speak on stages, I have a podcast, I'm on camera all the time. They just assume that I'm completely comfortable in those situations all the time. And that's just not the case. I'm still, during public speaking, when I go to an event and I have to speak, I am holed up in my room, still contemplating calling in sick for those, right? Like, it still happens. I have to work myself up to it. So I think there's a little bit of just that. There's a little bit of speaking. Then it is vulnerable. And then I have a mind that can overthink anything. So I'm like, I'm going to stumble. What if they laugh at you? And I'm like, it goes through all of those things to process. So I guess it's just a little bag of everything, and just fear of failure most likely is what it has a core tie to, because that's been such a strong element in my life.
Fear of failure, fear of public speaking, especially when it's something personal and emotional. What have you learned about yourself through this journey?
That's an endless list. I will say that even with the business books, that what I have learned about myself and how I show up to a project, how I show up to vulnerability, how I show up to other people, creating for them, with them, has been mind-boggling. I would not recognize myself 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 7 years ago. My first book published in 2019. I see pictures. I read some of my writings from back then. I even read the book that I published then, and I am a different human being than I was when I wrote that. So I think the growth that comes, if you allow it to, right? I don't think it's automatic, first of all. It's like saying that wisdom comes with age. I do not believe that. I believe that wisdom comes with work through those ages, right? Like it's just not an automatic thing. You have to work during that time to get that. So it's been a beautiful journey in self-discovery. And I think that's why I do it so much. I love that journey. I'm constantly learning something new about myself. I don't always like it, but I love that I can identify it. In fact, I just was introduced because I noticed I was being triggered by something that was happening in my business. And I'm like, and I just automatically want to blame them. Why are they doing this to me? Why can't they get it? And I'm like, whoa, that has nothing to do with them. That has something to do with me. And I'm like, oh, am I ever going to learn it all? Can I ever just get a break from all this? So, but I'm so grateful for the awareness of that.
Yeah, it sounds as if the process of writing, not only business books, but these more personal essay books, has been a very helpful experience in your personal evolution, your personal growth to becoming more soul-centered or heart-centered in your life and in your work. And I think that you and I are working together on a project at the moment, and it's you're helping your mother and I, coaching us a little bit with our writing of a series of essays and stories by not just the two of us, but a group of women. And I think many people, as I have in writing for this project that Her Wings Appeared, it's an amazing opportunity to do a lot of that depth work, that healing work, that releasing old stories and redefining the stories that you have running. When I mean stories, I don't mean actual written essays. I mean the stories that spin in our own heads, that are collected around the memories we have of in childhood and all throughout our lives. When we stop and take a minute to do this kind of work, like reorganizing our thinking, examining more closely how we really feel and what we really think, is a side effect, a positive symptom of writing, I think. And many people that might be viewing this may have an idea that they would like to write. And so what would you say to someone that is hearing this conversation that may have had an idea that they have a book in them, or maybe just thinking, what are my stories, and how would writing be helpful for me on my journey at the moment? Can you shed some light on how to get into writing, how to, maybe take some first steps if this is of interest?
Absolutely. Well, I want to go back just a little bit to what you were talking about with this project that we're working on together, and how that ties into this exact topic and question. As I read the stories that have been contributed and that you and Diana have written, it is so clear to me that we all have these stories inside of us. And the theme of your book, Her Wings Appeared, these are empowering stories. These are devastating stories with a outcome that is just phenomenal. And I shared with you before we went live that reading these, as I'm helping to organize this, is a very emotional experience. And this is women going through what they went through, but I'm relating to it on a whole other level that I didn't expect. I didn't expect this emotional response. And I think realizing that your experience, and these are just little glimpses into the whole of what makes you, are important and necessary, and there's somebody else that needs to hear them. You have a story that deserves to be heard because someone needs to hear it. And when you tap into that, it becomes, I don't like using the word easy because it's not, but it becomes easier to accept that you have a right to write. So if you can embrace that, then the rest tends to flow. And so my advice, if you want to write, is to write. Nothing else matters. I know the resistance is going to show up, and the resistance is really powerful. And you're going to want to think about marketing. You're going to want to think about a class you should sign up for. You're going to want to think about the cover. I see this all the time. People design their cover before the book's even written. None of it matters until you write it. So just sit down and write. And for my very first book, it took me 3 years to write Sign and Thrive, because not because it's so long. It's not this voluminous collection of stories, right? It's because resistance was strong. Resistance is strong in this one. And I had to talk myself into writing. It used to be one page, just sit down and write one page. Well, that was huge to me. I couldn't even move at one page. So I said, all right, we'll just write one paragraph. That was too big. I would just sit and stare at the screen for 15 minutes. So I got down to one sentence, and there were times where that was too long. I said one word, just write one word. And I have these ridiculous drafts where there's literally one word written, 2 words. And then I finally just said, okay. And then it just started flowing. And then I could build back up to where I could write that, 15 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, hour a day, whatever it was, until I could finally get it done. The second part of that is don't edit while you write, just write. Editors come later. There's people that will do that for you. There's AI tools that will do that for you now. Don't sweat it, just write it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's as though, and having gone through this process of writing several stories of my own, it definitely, something happens when you have a clear idea, or maybe it doesn't have to be a clear idea, but when you land on something, and I get what you're saying about just write, even if it's one word, but once you have done that and you start to get a sense of what you want to write about, or then it's as though something else takes over. It's as though you move into a different zone, or you have access to more emotions, more thoughts, more feelings, more memories as you give yourself over to the process. And I think it's having decades of doing what you just said. You sit down, you write, you have some ideas, you maybe come up with an outline of something, but then there's the juice isn't there, the nectar isn't there, right? It's just a good idea, but there can be sort of a disconnect between the emotional, physical reality of it. The head and the body and the heart aren't connected. But what I have found in the writing, it's like those three components, the analytical, the logical, the rational mind, the heart, the feelings, the memories, and the actual doing of it sort of locks in. And then that sort of takes you into a higher space in that creative flow. I think that's something that I've found in, actually slowing down enough to just not try and think it all out, but just feel it through.
There's this beautiful time when a book starts to come alive, and it does exactly that. And you're almost like two spirits as one. And it's hard to describe until you experience it, but it's almost a trance. And so I'll sometimes even not even remember what I wrote. I'll go back the next day and I'm like, I don't remember writing that, but man, that's good, or whatever it could be. And I think that's the magic that starts to happen, that chemistry, when you are in the zone that way.
Yeah.
There is, I think the hardest part of writing is the inner critic, the part that comes in and says, who do you think you are? For me, that was the biggest one. Who do you think you are to write this book? So I had to really work hard to find myself a mantra that I could recite and help bring myself out of that every single morning with passion and vigor, so I could remind myself that I deserve to write this book and somebody needs to hear it.
And what's your mantra, Bill?
So for me, it was, I had engraved Teddy Roosevelt's Man in the Arena speech, and I put that in my shower, and every single morning I would recite that out loud with vigor and passion in my shower to just remind myself who the heck I am and that I deserve these good things, and I can write this book.
Beautiful. So how can people find the Nectar List? And we're here at the top of the hour, and how can people connect with you? Because there could be some people that are notaries or jumped into that moment when at the beginning of our episode. How can people find you?
There's a couple different ways. So notarycoach.com is my company, and it will direct you to everything that I have going on. Of course, I have billsoroka.com. And if you're really interested in the Nectar List, nectarlist.com.
Nectarlist.com. Well, Bill, it's been really lovely to see you and to have this conversation and to hear all about, the writing process and all the joyful stories, the sweet stories that are contained in the Nectar List. I'm looking forward to having another look at that. So thank you for being here today, and lots of love to you.
Thank you so much for having me again. Lots of love and light your way as well. I appreciate you.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for being here today. Thank you to New Thought Media Network, our producers, and the Satya Center. The Satya Center is our sponsor. And if you would like to support this podcast and these collection of guests and interviews, you can go to growingedgelive.com and find out more about us there. And thank you, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth. To live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge.